We do have Zoom up and working. Welcome to those on Zoom, and apologies for the technical difficulties this morning. People have been working, trying to get them sorted, and we're there now. So we are going to go to the report 7.2 on the agenda, adopting the enforcement policy and companion compliance monitoring and incident response guidelines. Carl and Dave, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think all the councillors are here, but should we just push on?
We're going to push on because they're late, and we're not.
Splendid. I will take the report as read, and I'll just give you a quick, the summary is kind of articulates where we've got to with it. I mean, we have had an enforcement policy in this council now for quite a number of years, and it has evolved over that period of time. There's been some sort of more rapid changes in the last few years, and all policies around the country have all kind of reflected those changes, including ours. So we've got to the point now where this latest iteration kind of reflects a lot of that more, what you call the more modern enforcement, including, as the group manager has referred to, the VADE model and all the other things that have been incorporated into that policy. That enforcement policy has also been sort of redesigned, amended to cover off, to be a more universal council enforcement policy, where it originally started as just as a sort of a regional council sort of RMA focused sort of piece of work. The idea was to develop to be that sort of standard for all parts of the council, to who's got an enforcement or a regulatory process that they to give them that guidance and that support, and so everybody could understand and be consistent. So the enforcement policy kind of evolved to that point, and what we did as part of that is, as we I'll allude to in the workshop, we then decided that we would also develop that sort of standalone RMA focused part of it, which is the incident enforcement response guidelines, which feed up and into the enforcement policy, but give understanding around what we do in the RMA space to when we deal with incidents response, and what the regulator community and the complainants can expect in regards to how we deal with that approach to monitoring and enforcement, tying in, of course, to the enforcement policy. As alluded to, and for those that were in the workshop, this was then brought to the workshop with that draft that was then subsequently discussed in the workshop, and there were some recommendations that came through from that which have been incorporated into the policy, which hopefully you can see and reflects those changes and those recommendations. I don't know if I need to take it any further than that, because I know there are questions, and I'm just happy to take it. The one thing I was going to say is that, as you can see in the recommendations before I close, that it highlights the fact that the change there is a change in landscape, and as a result, we will need to make technical changes. And one of the recommendations is that while the council adopts the enforcement policy and the guidelines, there is ability for the group manager to be able to make that changes coming through as one of the recommendations, and allows us to be able to make those minor amendments, but report back into the council after we've subsequently made them. I don't think I have anything further. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for all the work, and I think it's going to be a really useful thing to have it going right across the whole, spanning all the regulatory areas, especially as what we've heard this morning about the role of councils in the future. My question was just about this thorny issue of anonymous complaints, and I just wanted reassurance really as to when when an anonymous complaint, is there really and truly such a thing, and do you really get complaints where you actually don't know who is complaining, or is an anonymous complaint a complaint which is where you do know who's complaining, but the person who they're complaining about doesn't know. And the worry is that there may be sort of a malicious intent to hurt, to weaponise the complaints process and to hurt the person because they want to get back at them for some reason. That's sort of the fear in the community. So it's just a reassurance of how, the regulatory team deal with those so that they're not hurting people who are being complained against unnecessarily.
Through the chair. Yes, councillor. So there is a small section in the guidelines that we've incorporated. It's probably just a paragraph or so. But to expand on that, there are obviously good reasons why some people do want to remain anonymous, and we've got to respect that. Maybe for privacy reasons, it may be for health and safety reasons. It could be. We do get genuine complaints where people just don't want to give their details, and we've got to respect that. But also, I guess, to try and address the concerns, we have to be measured and considered when allocating those, for instance, service request. So the process is that service requests will go through one of it ourselves for allocation in the main. And there'll obviously be an element of desktop inquiries which go on initially. And often those initial background inquiries into that anonymous complaint can be corroborated through other complaints that have been made about the same activity, previous complaints. There's a whole raft of things that go on in the background to validate, if you will, if we can, that complaint before it's actioned. So I guess that's the best we can do. If there was a situation where the complaint was totally anonymous, no details, no name, and just a few lines about something, we probably wouldn't even action that. So we'd look at all the information that we've got, and then we'd do a little bit of research around that to ensure that it's got some validation, and then of course we'd action it and go through our normal processes anyway.
Right. Okay, thanks very much. I think, the concern is probably that or a situation that you may have a person who's set up as being complained about, often to do with housing, that they don't kind of get a double whammy about attracting, the attention of compliance, and at the same time having, the complaint being completely anonymous, so that they get, a double kind of, that's really the concern. But I feel reassured about what you've said. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, through the chair. Could I just ask a question about the use of photographs in these two documents? And I'm not talking about the nice scenic ones on the front pages. That's all good. My question is about the use of the other photographs throughout the documents. Now, I know these are internal documents, but they will be publicly available. The photographs, there is no description or identification of where these places are. The reader of the document is left with the idea in my head that these have been activities that were bad, but I'm not actually told that. And I'm just questioning what is the purpose of these photographs, and to me, I don't like them being used in this way. So I'm just wondering if you've got a comment about that.
Through the chair, they just they kind of demonstrate the kind of typical things that are encountered. Like they're not obviously they've selected not to identify, and some of them are actually obviously are public waterways. And other examples, they just kind of tell a story about the sort of stuff that you can encounter, like pollution, the typical things that people see. I guess that's what it is. It's I guess that was what the purpose of them. They're not inconsistent with what other council. A lot of council enforcement policies throughout the country typically have those sort of things. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but that's what they're useful to kind of give someone an indication of what we encounter, what is seen out in the community.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it leaves me with the impression that every one of these instances where you've used one of these photographs has been found to be in breach of the rules. But I don't actually know whether they are or not. And so I think that's the problem I have with them.
Sorry, Councillor McKenzie. So they are quite generic because they typically were things that they didn't always associate with a person that's been subject to enforcement. Some of them were pollution events that we never identified who they were, but they're simply photos that depict what a typical kind of incident looks like paint in a stream or smoky fire, or they didn't, we were really careful not to obviously identify whether it was a particular landowner that was subject to an action. But they were just a kind of a portrayal of what is a typical event out in our community without,
I mean, without going into specifics, I guess I'm just conveying that I actually don't like the use of these photographs in the document. So you don't need to respond to that, but that's a view that I formed when I was reading through these documents. I was left feeling uncomfortable about it, particularly when some of them you might be able to drive around and find these places, and then you're left going, oh, I don't know about that. So anyway, I've made my views.
You have.
Yep.
Your views are noted, and there might be others that have a similar view. And I'm not so worried, just as my personal view. And anyway, I'm not sure what we do with that. Yeah. Oh well.
Through the chair, perhaps you want to give some consideration to it, and if these, if you adopt these guidelines, then any subsequent minor tweaks could be considered through Kim's process and bring that back to committee later on. If that was
because are we adopting the photos?
They're in there.
That's a question, isn't it? We're
policy will have photos too.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Councillor Granning.
Thanks. I've got a few questions, and just a follow-up to the question being asked, which I think is really around privacy. Do we have a privacy policy, and is this consistent with it?
Is this question around sorry for Councillor Green and question? Is this question around the photos? Or
Yes.
the working? Do we want to canvass the Leif and Illinois?
Yeah, not here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we do, and we're actually working on with. So there is a policy. The question of these photos themselves, I don't know. They haven't been assessed, obviously, against that policy in regards to. We haven't taken these out for another view on it. They've been in this draft document now for some time. I haven't been tested against that policy directly.
Kim's going to make a
If
comment.
I could just add to that. So the team that have come together to pull this policy and these guidelines together are drawing on all the relevant policies. So we've had our team member that's been part of making sure that what we've landed here is consistent with our privacy policy. So our answer to you, Councillor, would be that we believe so. But we can double check on that, but we believe that this is consistent with our privacy policy.
Okay, so as long as they're consistent with our privacy policy, then there should not be an issue, I would have thought. And if we're developing one, then clearly, if this guideline is inconsistent with that subsequent updated policy on privacy, then they would be changed so they are consistent. So just my 2 cents worth there. Just tying in with that, I did have some concern about suggesting that this go off to the GM to tweak, etc. I don't think that's appropriate. I think, especially when this report has emphasised 2.8 and 5.6, the importance of council's involvement in the process. I think it's equally important that council is involved throughout the entire process in terms of technical tweaks as well. So I'm not keen on resolution 3 and 4. I think it should come back to council. I don't see why there needs to be a delegation here, especially when it touches on the public, and the emphasis for the report is this needs to be approved by council. So I make that observation, and I won't be supporting resolution 3 and 4. My other questions just are in relation to generally just for the benefit of the public who haven't participated in workshops because they're not open to the public yet. My first question really is, will council's approach under this new policy change from the previous policy? And if so, how will it change? Because what I don't want is a shift towards blind and unempathetic enforcement of rules, but rather we want a more pragmatic and engagement and education first approach. I suppose what I'm suggesting is we don't want to see another Schaefer situation. We don't want to see another Schaefer situation, which I think could be better handled, and hopefully this new policy will do that. So that's my first question. My other question is, again, for the benefit of the public, what are the differences between the Braithwaite and Vade approach, given the earlier policy used the Braithwaite triangle of engagement and compliance, and the Vade approach, which is detailed in the new policy? And then thirdly, this is tied in, I suppose, in a way to the GM seeking delegation. What is the intent and direction of the new policy that the GM intends to operate within when making technical changes, which is referred to at 2.10? So they're my 3 questions. Happy to
Thank you.
repeat
There's
them
some
if they were lost.
responses to you.
So if I pick those ones up, so the first point, I won't be commenting on any particular
I appreciate that.
situations, but what we can say is that the whole purpose of regulation is focused on achieving the desired outcomes. And so we face situations at times where the regulation is not fit for purpose. So we've got various tools available to us to have set degrees of discretion, and that exists under the RMA as an example, and classifying things as de minimis. And then secondly, we have the ability to come back into the system to bring observations that are not quite working out the way that we want them to do, the council wanted them to go through. So we're able to recommend adjustments to various frameworks, whether they're bylaws, whether they're plans, whether they're regulations, and indeed sometimes this is messages that we put back to government. So the world of regulation is a very dynamic one, and it's focused on minimising harm and ensuring that the purpose of that sits behind the regulation is being achieved, and there needs to be a feedback loop so that we can always keep that relevant. So these documents are framed around delivering that type of outcome on behalf of the council. The discretion that is being sought around the GM is around as things evolve and things improve and the wider knowledge base around regulation take shape, then there would be an ability to incrementally adjust it to keep pace with, I guess, modernised view of regulation. And this is the question you ask around where do we go from where the Braithwaite model landed us to where the Vade model is taking us. The answer to that again is around evolution, in the sense that increasingly councils across the country have moved from quite a traditionalised approach to Braithwaite, which had the same mechanisms dialed into it, but the transparency around it wasn't as great as the VADE model gives us. So as the public have asked for greater transparency, councils have moved in the direction of the VADE model as a means of delivering that. And so we're aligning ourselves with best practice regulation. And we know these things because at one level, we're involved in the Government's Regulatory Practice Initiative, which all government agencies are dialed into. And secondly, we have a very close connection to the regional sector as the regulations are evolving in that space. And there's an active compliance and enforcement group which trade ideas, information, updates, draw off relevant court cases, etc. So it gets us to the point that we're able to move at pace with best regulations. So the suggestions we have here is enable to us to keep pace with that in an incremental way, to give that delegation through to the GM, and the obligation being to report back to this committee so that you can see how that's tracking and ask questions around that. And in some cases, you may ask us to revisit situations. That's where the transparency would come in. But to suggest that each and every version of the enforcement policy needs to come through as an entire document when the changes are minor and they are achieving best practice, seems to me to be one step beyond where the staff are recommending we go with this. But it's available to the council to actually have a hands-on approach if that's what councillors deem to be fit. The staff recommendation is that's probably unnecessary.
Thank you.
So I know you're going to a very high level response, but I'm just trying to get, and for the benefit of the public, again, the change in approach between the new policy and the old policy. You've talked about transparency, but what does that really mean? I mean, other than transparency, which is bringing back incremental changes, either for council approval or for council to review, is that that's the only change between the two policies? Because I kind of thought that we're already doing that every time we review the policy. Or are you suggesting that VADE's difference between Braithwaite is only that the reviews happen more quickly? That's the only difference between the two new policies.
In terms of the effectiveness of the two approaches, yes, it is around improving transparency and making it clear that there's two aspects to what considers regulation, what drives regulation. One is the degree of harm that's being caused or is likely to be caused from particular action, and the second element is the attitude of the person that you're dealing with. And so the VADE model allows both of those aspects to be treated either together or individually. So it's more transparent that an attitudinal matter may lead to a higher escalation, greater use of tools, than something that that would normally attract if you had a compliant person who sees that something hasn't been done and takes steps to do it. The policy provides for that. It's when we get into situations where people do not wish to comply and take steps that actually makes the job of our officers more difficult. The VADE model makes it very clear and very transparent that there will be consequences, whereas that the transparency of that is not obvious to everyone under the Braithwaite model. It's a component of it, but it's not drawn out in the same transparent way that the VADE model book brings it out.
Thank you.
So are you suggesting that that is the only change between the two policies?
I'm suggesting that's the essential change. I've got both Carl and Dave who can jump in and say there's other fundamental changes, but to me it's evolutionary, it's not revolutionary.
Okay, so that's one. So what are the other changes? Again, this is just for the benefit of the public who've probably not seen this document before.
I'll defer to Dave who can comment on the specifics.
Through the chair, I guess one example is that we now have templates and standards which we use when formulating our decision making. Those essentially are part of our guidelines, which are the RMA portion of this, and they're the more specific guidelines which we use for the RMA decision making. In terms of that, the templates which we have cover off decision making right from the formal warning to infringements, to issuing abatement notices, and then into court action. So the previous guidelines, I don't think were quite, didn't encompass or make that clear. But sitting in this, behind this, are a whole set of procedures now which were not in place back in 2016. A lot of those recommendations came out of an audit which Council Compliance Department was subject to a few years ago, and those recommendations have been implemented and updated in this latest document. So I guess that's how I try and answer that question.
Thank you. Do you have something further, Councillor?
Yeah. So that's the only, they're the only two issues: a documentation of process that wasn't there before, and more transparency. So, do I take it from this that our general approach under the previous policy, which was empathetic enforcement of rules, i.e. a pragmatic approach to engagement and education first, is still the focus and intent, which is the other question I asked, the intent and direction of this new policy? Or is it approach is just to enforce the rules?
Who'd like to respond there?
I think it's probably an area we've covered already,
Yeah.
Councillor, but in putting the VADE model up, it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
The first approach we take is to achieve voluntary compliance. The second approach, if that hasn't worked, we take assisted. We need assisted. The third thing is we start to provide direction. And the fourth area, if we need to get to that point, is we take enforcement. Now, all of that is in a consequence of the level of harm that has been produced. If you've got a serial polluter, you're not going to use the V, you're not going to use the A, you're not going to use the D, you're going to go straight to enforcement. So there is no formula here that can satisfy some of your questions. It's a case of understanding that that's the approach, but the nature of the issue at hand is a key driver in terms of the actions that we need to take. That's on one side of the pyramid. The other side is the attitude of the person that we're dealing with. And you may end up escalating to a situation where action needs to be taken that you might not normally take if someone is actually more cooperative.
So is that the difference then between...
Wait, just to pause, Councillor. This point is being laboured now. We've got a number of other reports to go through. Those that attended the workshop will understand quite clearly the VADE model.
but this is for the general public.
Don't interrupt me. So we've been going some time with this and it's becoming repetitive. So I feel like the answers are being provided to you, and I'm asking if you've got a question on something new now, please.
Well, from the answers, I still don't know whether the approach under the previous policy is still the same approach.
The answer is
yes.
Policy.
Well, that's
the
all.
answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Fantastic.
Yep.
So my other question was just in relation to the intent and direction. So if the answer is yes, then the intent and direction of the new policy is the same as the old policy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
Can you please, can you move on to something new, Councillor?
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to get answers to the questions I've asked.
Well, they've been given very clearly in my view. And if you're wanting to labour it, you're going to have to do it somewhere else because we need to move on. There are others that are wanting to have questions. Please bring in a new question.
So my other point, which I raised at the start, but which I'm re-emphasising again, is given the answers to this, I'm not convinced that discretion is required for incremental adjustment. This touches on the public. This is quite a significant policy. We've had incidents before about how council is conducting itself. And I think what would be more appropriate is where the incremental adjustment is required, that we make those changes that are fully identified in the policy. This is not new. We've done this with other policy documents where small changes have been made. Delegations comes to mind. So I don't see that we need to give the GM delegation for these incremental adjustments. I think it's very important that the public see that councillors, and that's our role here, we're here to make sure that the values of our community are reflected in the policies that we adopt. I mean, if we're not doing that, I really question why we have a local government at all. This could all be centrally delegated. I think that's why it's quite important that council is still involved, and therefore I don't think technical, especially in this space, should be left to staff. I think it's very important, as the report already identified, the importance of council being involved in passing this, that any changes are also involved with council, and that we have the opportunity to have that input. So again,
Thank you.
I don't support
Thank you.
resolution 3 or 4.
Yep.
I don't think it's required.
Yes, as you stated earlier, yes, we understand that. So you've
Yeah,
made your
I'm just
point very
responding to the
clearly.
points that
Yep.
the GM made.
Yes, thank you. So your points are noted again. Do you have any other questions? I'm going to move on to the other speakers.
That was the 4 questions that I put. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Going back to what Councillor Mackenzie raised right at the beginning around those photos, and I understand that it's not a breach of our privacy. Can I have assurance that over this recent weather event, where there's been numerous photos put up all over the place, that when there is a photo, that they will not be used as an example for any other policy when there potentially could be an environment breach due to Mother Nature, that we're not going to suddenly, as has this report shown us, some concerning areas? It's my first question.
In terms of this policy, can you make a relationship between what's being raised? It might be that it's an area that gets raised somewhere else. So I'm asking the relevance to this policy at this time.
It's covered up in the GM report, the interface between response and regulation.
Yeah.
It's not a policy matter. So.
No, I think it sits. It's a concern for you, but I think it sits somewhere else than in this kaupapa just right now.
And that's fine, as long as we can get some feedback, because as much as I appreciate what the staff have done for this report, you know, some of us could work out where those photos are. And I'm just concerned that if we've been out, which we have been out, we've done a great job with our response, we've had helicopter drops and other things happening. I would hate to see something that was used through this horrific event that our communities were. So can that come back at some point so we can talk about that?
Yes.
My other
Can I just check?
Yep.
So you're thinking photographs that are being, we all see, that they are not used for some enforcement matter.
correct.
Yeah. Hard to imagine that it would be given the disaster that's happened, but I think that needs to be addressed in some other arena.
I agree. So the photographs used in here, obviously, they're from many moons ago, and they're just examples. All these photos that are getting circulated around in the public space, and that what we would never use them for to use them in public facing documents or like policy things. We're very careful about not grabbing stuff to use it for that. In regards to the wider question, I guess, is a support around other actions that the council might engage with. I think that's a question that, it's not probably.
Thank you. You've got something extra?
Yeah, thank you. Just one point of clarification for me when I'm processing this change of policy from the Braith to the VADE model. So will the affected people that's stuck within a system, like whether it's the old policy or the new one, will they be able to see the public interest test that must be performed as part of our processes?
I think the answer to that is that the public interest test comes in at the Solicitor General through the Solicitor General guidelines. So that is it's a relevant consideration that you have delegated through to the Group Manager for Environmental Assurance on legal advice. So when legal advice comes into play, that then triggers a confidentiality component. So it may or may not be possible to make the public interest evaluation available. I think it's very situation specific because of that requirement that you've given for the delegation to only be exercised with legal advice.
Okay, and then my last question, and sorry to go on, is around the group manager that we give consent for minor changes. What's a minor change as opposed to something else?
And that was a question I was going to ask, is that in terms of how we've framed this, is this unusual? Does it what's the level of any risk it might raise, or if somebody can speak to that in terms of within our whole system and all the areas in which this type of clause gets brought forward for minor amendments. Can we speak to that more broadly, please?
Through the chair, I guess we envisage that the guidelines are the overarching document which provide a policy about how council's regulatory functions will follow. The RMA incident response guidelines are to be read in conjunction with that, and they're more specific to how we will conduct our inquiries in our business. They're already set now, and obviously, if adopted, will be in play for the public to see as well. It's envisaged that other arms of council that have got a regulatory function, such as the harbour master that we discussed before, but also other parts of council that have laws which they've got to enforce, that each one of those areas will develop their own operating procedure or guidelines. And it was envisaged that once those are developed, they would tie in and there would be a link to this overarching document. And so I guess from my perspective, it was envisaged when those documents are developed, they come to committee, and those type of tweaks are then incorporated into the overarching enforcement document. So that was one example where we envisaged there would be some minor tweaks.
And in terms of the language of minor amendments, council's generally pretty clear around what that means. We must have some definitions or criteria, or is it just like, that feels like it's minor? I imagine we're a bit more robust than that.
Well, I guess we've kind of indicated in the paper that providing the aims and objectives and the way we're going, the thrust of the enforcement policy remains the same. That's the key focus, is that there shouldn't be changes, to that. The focus stays the same, but practically we need to make some changes and adopt some new guidelines in other areas, and we just want to incorporate those into it.
Yes. The committee will test it because it comes back. Do you have anything further? Okay. Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. I've just looked at that recommendation again, and you can read it in lots of different ways. So I'd like to get some clarification around it. But first, I'd be happy to move 1 and 2. But when it comes to 3, and because I read that and it delegates authority to the group manager, environmental assurance, to make any changes, but there's no, you read that on its own, and that says over time. So I would like, but then 4 notes that any changes would come back to the next committee meeting. So can I please have some clarification around what 3 actually means? So is it going to be minor changes to this document with a final okay at the next meeting and then no further changes? Or, because when you first read 3, it reads that there's no time restriction on when those changes can be made, because at initial reading it's a blanket. So could we have some clarification around that, please? Because that would make a significant difference to how I would vote for these recommendations.
So if I pick this one up, I think the gap between policies that we're currently dealing with is in the order of 10 years. Between the current policy and today. Yep. And since that time, a lot of things have moved to the point that we're coming back to you and we're using different models and those sorts of things. There's been some significant rework to get the same result, but in a more transparent way. And I think what the staff have envisaged is that while this is pretty strongly tied into processes that are well established and particularly in the context of the RMA. But as we evolve the frameworks for the likes of the Harbour Master, Rob's team has got quite a significant role to play in the biosecurity space. Laws changed there, directions changed there. So the ability to keep this document as a generic document that had paid all regulators across the council, the changes where they are minor, it will be a matter for judgment. All these things are judgment. But then in bringing it back to the very next committee, after those minor changes have been made, the committee has the ability to exercise judgment as to whether that was in their minds minor or not. And you may suggest that actually those are more than minor and need a more substantive refresh of the document. So I think we've all got a part to play in this, because what is minor in one person's eye might not be minor in another, and it's pretty hard to write that down in black and white. But I think the combination between staff advice, the judgment that I will bring to bear in terms of whether I accept that advice, the judgment that you'll bring to bear in terms of whether you agree with what my decision ultimately was. I think there's checks and balances in this to make to meet councillors' concerns that this policy and this approach remains fit for purpose at all times. So I think there's a little bit of trust here that we'll actually exercise judgment through that chain in a responsible way. And so I guess that's my answer. I think that answers your question. Let me know if you need more to it than that.
No, I think it does answer my question. And so it does make it clear that this would expand over 10 years. So for me, I actually don't feel comfortable, because I think this policy is really good. But there are still things that when we use things like consistency of process, but also we use words like having discretion, there are natural potential areas where perception can come into it. And I fully support those being in there, don't get me wrong. And I actually really support staff in this approach. I think it's very good. But I think for me, how this can be interpreted, how minor adjustments over time can have a significant impact. I'm supportive of 1 and 2, but not supportive of 3 and 4.
And does this feel like there must be something about this, because we do this often, where there are minor adjustments made in all sorts of areas.
We certainly do.
But there's something about this that's different.
We make minor adjustments to things often, but that's to the actual policy, and it's usually what I see is it's changes in wording, and then the policy comes back for final adoption or whatever else. That's just my experience and my understanding. I could be wrong. To me, this feels a little different.
Right. And
I just want to make sure that, because I think this policy is great, and I think staff generally do a really good job. But I think everybody's intention of what the intent of this document, what I might see and what the intent of it from our discussions during the workshop would be different to what my colleague next door to me would see as the intent, or my colleague on this side. We all have a slightly different take. And I think in this particular area, it's always good to have discourse on what's going on and what the actual intent is, because what the next council might be different to what ours is. And so long as it fits within this policy, which I think is very good, and staff have done a great job on it, I think there's also enough space for the GM to have discretion for lots of different.
Yes, thank you.
That's just my point.
Points are very clearly made. Have you moved anything?
Yes, I moved 1 and 2.
Okay. So we have Councillor Mackenzie next, and then Councillor Kinnemoth, and then I'm going to draw this to putting a vote for should there be a seconder to your resolution.
Happy to second, by the way, happy to second. I totally agree with what Jo has said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's better for me, Councillor Greening, if you put your hand up and participate like everybody else does. Thank you.
Thank you very much through the chair. Just to indicate that I have a different view than the mover, and should the vote be lost on 1 and 2, then I'm happy to move 1, 2, 3 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnemont, and then I'm going to put the resolution.
I support Councillor Ellis's movement here only because why, and we've got a time frame we're talking about here of when you've got an issue, a minor amendment to be done, and that you can't wait till the next committee meeting for it to be resolved. To me, it's a time issue, and I don't see the need to delegate the authority for such a minor amendment. Can't wait till the next committee meeting. So I support Councillor Ellis.
Well, it will elongate things, won't it? So I won't be supporting the resolution. I support the 1, 2, 3 and 4, so I'd be supporting the foreshadowed. I'm going to, so Councillor Ellis has moved resolutions that includes points 1 and 2. It's been seconded by Councillor Greening. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour,
I've
please
got my
say
hand
aye.
up. Can I ask a question?
No, we've passed that. I said earlier that I was going to go to Councillor Kinnemont and that's, and then we're going to move. We've got a lot to get on with. No, don't interrupt me. Do not interrupt me.
It's a point of order.
Do not interrupt me.
Okay.
Stop
Point
it.
of order. Point of order, Chair.
What's your point of order?
If this is voted down, you can't return it. You've rejected the principal vote. You can't relitigate it. You
Thank
voted
you.
against it.
I'll take some advice. Thank you.
Policy would be lost.
The advice I've been given is that if should this resolution for 1 and 2 be lost, that we can go back to the substantive resolution of 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I'm going to put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Against. Can we just do a hands up for aye? So that's 4 hands up for against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The resolution is lost. In which case we now.
I've moved 1, 2, 3, 4.
Councillor Mackenzie has moved the resolution as 1, 2, 3 and 4 as it was initially presented. It's been seconded by Councillor Dowler.
Point of order. Can I just get clarity around that? Because I thought the principal purpose of the resolution was the policy, not the delegation.
I've been given the advice that that we can go to the substantial original resolution, and I've got
so
some
the
knowledge.
Substantive point has been defeated, and now you're returning to the principal point of the resolution, which is the policy, having just been defeated. I think you're wrong there. I've raised this on numerous occasions in the past, and I've been told, no, you can't do that. It's been lost.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So I've been given advice by a number of people that we can, and this is the correct thing to do. So I'm going to carry on with that. So we've got a mover and a seconder. I think we've had plenty of discussion about it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Against. Please record it. Thank you.
Carried. Yes, it's certainly recorded. Thank you, everybody. We're going to adjourn now for lunch, and we're going to have. We're going to come back at 12:30 and carry on the meeting then. Thank you, everybody. There's an imperative that we have the briefing now, not wait until the finish of our next reports. I'm not sure where Tim has got to.
Through you, Madam Chair, it is from Tim's perspective. He asked us if we bring it forward into this break.
Yes. All good. Yes.
Well, he can have.
Do you want to?
That I'd like to point out with the flood events, we're doing some water quality monitoring in the coming weeks that will inform the Rahui process as well as council warning processes. Also, our current monitoring showed that between the floods there was a period of days there where our rivers did come right in terms of swimmability if people were out there wanting to swim in this time of year. So happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Trevor in the report? And that is extraordinary that it could be swimmable that quickly. Anyway, isn't it? I'm trying to take that.
Our normal warning is that rivers will come right within 48 hours, but in a big flood like this, where it's dirty for many, many days, then it can be a bit longer.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. A couple of things. It's always interesting the timing of when our reports come in. And I get that this was scheduled because this is what we do every 6 months or whatever it is. But in light of what's happened in our community, the water quality report can have a massive negative feedback when we're doing our best to get things back after this massive weather event. And implications of things going out misinterpreted is not good. On many levels, it's not good. So I know I have to be careful of what I say.
Yeah, I can tell you.
But I struggle with this. But I do have a question.
Yeah, I can't quite get what you're saying, but that's because you're being careful. Yeah,
You're right.
Maybe ask your question and we'll see what happens then.
So you talked about the Rahui, and I totally respect why the Rahui was put on. The thing that I'm grappling with is, so in August 2023, we put a Rahui out in a certain area because of a breach. As far as I understand, that Rahui has never been lifted. And we've been working on how we get it lifted, because it seems that potentially we don't have a baseline to work from to know where we now sit with our contamination or struggles with the quality in an area. And I get with this weather event that we put a Rahui in which covered a much wider span, and I look at the report, but I wonder, when will we know that we can lift it whereby it's safe? And I know that's to do with iwi, and I know that's to do with the public health as well as us. But I'm just worried that, the August 2023 event still had us in a Pacific area around Motueka under a Rahui, and now we've, rightfully so, with the latest weather event, had to extend it. But what is the template on revisiting, making sure everything's safe, putting correct messaging out where we don't get stuck like we are in August 2023?
Thank you.
Well, just to start off with, my understanding is that the Rahui in August 23 was a distinct Rahui compared to the Motueka wastewater treatment plant Rahui, which is still in place. The one for the August 22 event, pardon me, was lifted. And it's not council that makes these decisions. We are asked from time to time about water quality information. I think that probably the best solution for our community to take their health into their own hands by, irrespective of the Rahui. Now, I'm just talking about swimmability that we report. that if we had a model, most councils now, well, a large number of councils now have a model that goes out to the community, and on any particular day they can see whether the levels of fecal indicated bacteria are likely to be safe for swimming or not. And so they could make the decisions to swim on that basis. That is not that's a separate process to the Rahui, and our iwi partners are making those decisions.
Kia ora through the chair. Yes, so we need to remember what the Rahui's put in there for, and it's a partnership. So it was done with Civil Defence, and it's reflecting our partnership that we have across Te Taiihu, not just with iwi, but with all of the partners who are there. And a large part of putting it in place was actually to do with navigational hazards. Remember, there was a lot of net and rubbish out there. A large part of it is because when you wash the land, it all ends up in the sea, and we don't want people in that. And a large part of it is just giving the system a chance to reset. And Motueka is still discharging waste to water. Brightwater is still discharging waste to water. It would be inappropriate for us to suggest, even though we might not be able to measure that impact on the coast, that is still occurring, and that is not a situation that is appropriate or culturally safe either. We don't deal with the cultural part, that's up to our partners, but our part is we know that we are still discharging effluent, and it's not by choice, absolutely not by choice, because of the situation. So what Trevor's doing here is he's allowing some information, objective information, into that discussion when we reassess the need for that Rahui. And so we have to be careful, because there's a whole lot of emotion about Rahui. So we actually want it. It works for us as in council. So council supporting this, and we absolutely do support that Rahui. What we need to do is make sure it doesn't stay too long, because then we lose the community, and that's what Trevor's about.
Rahui are placed for a number of reasons, but highly pragmatic thing to do. And if there wasn't such a thing as a Rahui, then council and health officials and others will be saying, don't swim, don't collect kai moana, don't, so it's like it's a highly pragmatic response, and there will be something within the system of the agencies alongside iwi partners that works out an appropriate time for it to be lifted in terms of safety. Yeah. Yes, Trinity.
Yeah, so through you, Chair. So I understand the importance and the reason for the Rahui. My question was around the previous one from August 23 hadn't been lifted. I get we've still got effluent and stuff happening due to the weather event, but I want to be reassured that we know that there is a capacity when things have calmed and the water quality is back, that the Rahui would be lifted. Because from what I've attended meetings from the August one, we still hadn't been able to lift it, and people were ignoring it because we've been in that state for so long that people were putting themselves at risk. My other comment that I really wanted to make is that when you put a report out, and as I said at the beginning of my conversation, I get that the timing of this report wasn't your choice. It's when it sits in the big machine of, when we report back. But the implications of stating things around poor quality of water, for Kaiteri, for example, financially that is going to have a massive impact on Kaiteri and people wanting to come there at Christmas time. So will we revisit the quality of the water? Will we give out clear messaging? When it comes closer to summer, you would have seen Bethany got nailed, Bethany Park, and the clear messaging from all the interviews that they've had on media is that they believe they'll be back up ready to run for Christmas. I'm just wondering where that leaves Kaiteri with the water quality for people to even want to come back and camp there, and the economical benefits of having people come back to our beautiful area. So can we have some messaging around what that looks like? And if the water doesn't settle, what is our solution to stop us getting these low rating water reports? Because we can't just acknowledge we have a problem and then not be solution based. Thank you.
Those are very good questions. I was in a meeting yesterday regarding the process with the Rahui associated with the Motueka wastewater treatment process. I think there is a pathway forward for further investigations to get towards a point of lifting. That a similar process that was followed with the Wairau Lagoons and their wastewater discharge from Blenheim. Your questions about Kaiteritiri, I think we do need to work with Kaiteritiri Recreation Reserve on this. Absolutely, we have had meetings on site. There are other solutions that we should talk through, such as the exposed grates that could be tempting for people that are out of sight, people to place grey or black water down. There are some solutions that we should work with, but it's a team approach. So we do need to get together. I think this tipping into the poor category is even more of a impetus to work those through. We, as I explained last year as well, that we have done surveys to try and look at the houses within the network and the sewer lines and what have you. That is very clear that the wastewater engineers have done as much as they can to investigate that. We did, as I said, we've had that incident of a discharge from, a witness of a discharge from a camper van into that network, and that can, so it is, it's not just theoretical, it's a potential. So there are options. We've talked about rerouting the outlet of that pipe somehow away from the swimming area or something. So yeah, we should explore those further. I think we do need to be in the messaging for the media. I hope it comes through that this is only part of the beach. I mean, it is used for swimming, this part of the beach, so we don't sample in places where people don't swim, but it's from our sampling in the past, the southern part of the beach has very, very high compliance with the water quality guidelines. So we do need to put that in context. And it was only 3 exceedances over 22 samples. So it's actually the vast majority of the time that Kaiteritiri is compliant. It's just the way the guidelines work. It's the 95th percentile. So if you get more than 2 results, it's that third one that trips you over. It's just unfortunate that we have got on the wrong side of that tripping. Oh yes, we're looking at planning an additional site at Kaiteritiri, probably 100 metres to the south of this one, to report alongside at the same time. And my betting is that will be compliant as we have found it in the past, but we've only sampled it intermittently in the past. Now we'll sample every time to get a relationship between those 2 sites. We have in the past sampled 20 sites or 20 times or more in the season for the outlet of the estuary. That is very good water quality. And we could also sample that as well for this coming season, and to show that that's not a contributor again as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. I noticed, I know, from that site on Pohara Beach that, kept tripping up, and I think it's clear now, And I know that back then, the leaseholders of the camp, hated it when it came out as being a message, and, and felt like it didn't sound good, You're going to go to Pohara Beach for Christmas? Probably not. It just didn't look good, even though it was like this very discreet sort of spot that was away from there. So I get the business around how it looks and sounds. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie.
Yep, thank you through the chair. Trevor, can I just be clear on 4.8 when you talk about the Kaiteri site? you've got that the current site is 60 metres south of a stormwater drain that runs into the beach. Is the stormwater drain the big black pipe? And so south of that pipe, is that towards the shops or towards the boat ramp?
South is towards the shops, yes, away from the pipe. So there's the boat ramp is furthest north. I think it's about 70 metres north of the pipe. Then there's the pipe, and then the shop is about 100 metres or so south of there.
Okay, so your 60 metres south of the drain will actually be, I would say, within that buoyed off swimming area in the summer.
That's correct. The pipe is within the swimming area.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Is somebody willing to move the receipt of the report?
I'm happy to do that.
Oh, very good. And is someone happy to second? Councillor Ellis? If there's nothing further from anybody, thank you very much for your work and team's work, Trevor. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We're going to go with 7.5 next, our district-wide water monitoring report, please. Neil?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, I'll take it the report has been read and I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. I guess when I read the report, what was going through my mind was I think that we've come a long way in terms of the levels of non-compliance and actually originally I always used to think that this whole system needed a huge amount of work, and maybe it did back in 2021, but actually it seems to be working so much better. Great level of compliance. Might have been helped by the fact that we had plenty of rain, but I don't know. But so I wanted to congratulate the staff really, because I think it's just such a much better read than it has been in the past. So well done.
Thank you very much.
You're happy to move on that accolade?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnemont.
If it suits you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Just the toxic algae report and part of your report here about 4 dog deaths and things like that.
Different report.
Which report have you got there, Councillor?
Contact recreation water quality.
Yeah, we've moved on to our district-wide water monitoring.
Okay.
Contact.
Happy to second that too.
Okay. Very flexible bunch, aren't we? Any other questions or comments? Well, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane has been in and out of this room a number of times today. It's probably been the recipient of most of the chaos. Our annual Dairy Farm Compliance Monitoring Report 24-25. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. I take the report as read and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Butler's happy to move the receipt of the report. Yes.
Just so that after all these weather events, then there's likely to be maybe some effects, do you think, in terms of contamination? Will we just continue to do the monitoring in the same routine?
Oh, the monitoring will continue as it is. I think we've got about 12 farms fairly heavily impacted, some severely. So, but the expectation with the effluent discharge is that by the time they come around to calving, they will be fully compliant with the rules. circumstantial. Some of them have got no fencing, they've got no effluent discharge area at the moment, so they are flat out trying to rectify before calving, which isn't far away.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Kinnemont?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would love to second this report.
It was interesting around just some of the changing back into dairy farming. So there's been this sort of part of the report over the times that I've been here has been tracking what's happening with conversions or not, or, you know, I know at home quite a few dairy farms that just, you know, changed into grazing, heifer grazing, or so interesting to see that some are beginning to switch back in. Yeah,
it is. I think the payouts got a lot to do with that. And those that have been considering maybe for the last 3 or 4 years of getting out of dairy farming and moving into dry stock, I think the payouts sort of influencing their decision to hang around for a bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's nothing further from councillors, Jane. We appreciate the report coming through each time it does, and just keeping that, you know, that overview. And there's a really good compliance still happening, and on the back of all that work that's gone on in the past of education first and, you know, support to change. So thank you for that. Thank you for your work and those associated with this. Been moved by Councillor Butler and seconded by Councillor Kinnemont. So I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your input and considered questions or comments today, and particularly appreciate the efforts of staff given the pressure that many are under. It just leaves me to close with karakia. Karakia tātou. Thank you, Ro, on flight desk. Very helpful for support here, and we've had a lot of takes off landings. And thank you, Kim, for your role with us. Karakia tātou. Kia hiki te kōrero, kia wātia, kia mama te manawa o te tangata. Kia u ki te ara mō tātou e oro nei, ko rongo, ki runga, kia tina, hui e, tai kia. Let the discussions be lifted, clear away and ease the hearts of people, and keep focusing on life. Thank you.